Hey guys, kinggath here, and in this video we're going to go over the 6 major classes of plots and talk about some of the difference in mechanics and what you can expect from each type. Now, each plot type has something unique about it. It's beyond just the building plans. They often have slightly different mechanics or particular things you should be aware of. So let's start with residential, which is going to be the one you need most of because you need 1 per settler. Now, there are exceptions to that. There are some buildings that include beds for multiple settlers, though in the base mod, they all just supply beds for a single settler. So the residential exterior types, the 2x2s, will include a roof, and that's important to know because of the base game's shelter mechanic. So in Fallout 4, if a bed doesn't have a roof over it, your settlers get unhappy because they're being rained on. So be sure if you use interior plots that you use them in such a place that the bed ends up underneath a roof. So if you decide to use these outside like I have, you're going to want to tag on some extra pieces of structure to make sure that there's a roof overhead. Otherwise, your settlers will be very unhappy. Next up are agricultural. Now there's a couple of interesting things to know about these. One is that the 2x2 type does not ever need power. These are designed to be basically farms. They're not powered, and the interior actually do use power. So this is where you're going to find things like greenhouses and grow rooms that might have interior power supplies required. Now, the agricultural plots work a little differently than vanilla crops. Instead of starting out with a large amount of food per settler, so in the base game you could have 6 food per settler. In Sim Settlements, you get just 2 food at the start, and as you level up the agricultural plots, they ultimately produce way more food than you could with vanilla. So it's kind of a slow build up toward something more advanced. So you're sacrificing a little bit up front to have more settlers farming, and then eventually you'll need less than you do in vanilla. So the idea behind a lot of Sim Settlements is that over time your settlers become more advanced and they kind of have like a little civilization involvement. So over time they need to rely less on farming and defenses and can rely more on automation. So you'll see that theme throughout. But just know with agricultural, the fact that they produce 2 food is temporary. It's designed that way in the early game and then quickly out levels it so that agricultural plots are more efficient than vanilla farming. Next up are industrial. So industrial actually have a 3rd type that may or may not appear for you, but let's talk about the base 2 that appear. So industrial plot 2x2, in the base game in Sim Settlements, there's only 1 designed for this because these aren't designed for you to have a ton of necessarily right off the bat, though know that if you're using city plans, the more basic industrial plots you have, the faster your city will upgrade because they dramatically increase the city scrap needed. So if you're not familiar with city plans, that's covered in a later video, which you can jump to if you'd like in the series. Interior industrial plots, again, work the same way as the other interiors in that they require power nearby via conduit. And then there's the advanced industrial plot. So I mentioned these are the one exception to needing power in order to build up level 1 and to function. So these are that one exception where you'll need to make sure they're powered right away. They may or may not appear for you because they're designed to be used late game. So they require, first of all, an add-on pack or expansion in order to show up. They were first introduced with the Industrial Revolution expansion, which includes 45 different designs for these buildings. Now, I'm not going to go in detail about how these work. They're called advanced for a reason. They are very advanced to play with. They add you a lot of options, but they work very differently than other plot types. So if you're interested in that, check out the advanced building plans video, which will go over in depth about how all of those actually work. Just know for now that if you're deciding to build these, you're going to want to wait till later in your settlement's life and that you're going to want to power them right away. Next up, we have commercial. So commercial build shops that your settlers can run, and you can actually talk to them and buy goods from them. And now as the commercial plots upgrade, they will have better and better loot, but we'll talk about that more in the upgrades video. So the only major difference between the interior and the exterior version of commercial plots is that the exterior versions all include a street light. So that will actually have a light on it once you've powered them up so that you can see the area nearby very easily. Next, we have martial plots. This is another type where there's an extra third style that will appear depending on which add-on packs you have installed. So by default, the base game includes a single martial plot design for a guard post. And as you install more add-on packs, you'll find that some of them introduce a 2x2 martial plot building. And that basically looks exactly the same as this, with that rounded piece on the front, just much larger. And those will appear, the 2x2 martial plot option will appear if you have add-on packs that introduce those building plans. So martial plots are generally designed to be facing the direction of that round circle so that you're pointing that at the bad guys. So for example, if I wanted to build a martial plot to guard the sanctuary bridge, I would make sure that that rounded front piece is facing toward the bridge. Then just like every other plot type, my settlers would enter in from the arrow side, and when they're standing guard, they would generally be standing facing in that direction. And the 2x2 martial plots have that same thing. Now the interior martial plots again have the same issues of the other interior types, in that where you face them will often depend on the actual building plan itself, but they're not generally acting as guard posts in the same sense as the 1x1 or 2x2, and instead are going to be more things like offices and other spaces that would make sense inside of a building. Then lastly, we have the recreational plots. So recreational plots, much like commercial plots, the 2x2 recreational do have a street lamp that will be powered up and lit once you add power to that particular plot. And all recreational plots include a relaxation marker so that in the evening when your settlers aren't working, they will tend to be drawn toward these. Now with the commercial plots, that also applies to the bar type. They will have a relaxation marker, so in the evening, your settlers will tend to go toward things that make the most sense. So that should give you a rough idea of how you should be using the different plot types. There's definitely a lot more detail to go into about the plot gameplay, and we'll cover that in future videos, including the upgrades video, the ASAM sensor video, and so much more. There's tons more to learn.
Thanks for watching, and keep an eye on the channel for additional of these little tutorials. My goal is to start with the simplest stuff and work our way toward the more advanced features in Sim Settlements.